Today we are going to compare two decimals using visual models. We need to remember our comparison signs are greater than, less than, and equal to. And we are going to be using a decimal grid and the place value chart to help us find our answer. So we're going to start out using this place value chart. So our first decimal here, we have 3/10. So we're going to fill in this chart. So we know that this decimal is not greater than 1, so we're going to fill in a 0 for the ones place. Our tenths, we know that there's a 3 there because it's 3/10. And we don't have any hundredths, so we can either leave this blank or we can add a 0 here. Our next decimal is 3/100. Again, we'll start with our ones. This decimal is not greater than 1, so I'm going to fill in a 0 for the ones column. I noticed there's also a 0 for the tenths column, so I'm going to place a 0 here. And then in our units or hundredths, we have 3. We'll place that here. Now this chart is going to help us figure out how many rods and units we're going to need to show these decimals in our decimal grid. So let's first start out with 3/10. So let's take a look. We have 3 in the tenths place, and we know that is equivalent to a rod. So we're going to need 3 rods to represent this decimal. So 1, 2, and 3. And I'll put a little arrow there. So we also know that that's equivalent to 3/10 or 30/100. Next we have 3/100. I'm going to take a look at my chart down here. I don't have any flats, don't have any rods, but I'm going to include 3 units because that's my hundredths. So 1, 2, 3. And now our grids can help us compare these two decimals, and we can see that 3/10 is greater than 3/100. So I'm going to be using the greater than sign. Our next problem, we have 36/100 compared to 5/10. Again, we're going to start with this place value chart. So 36/100, it's not greater than 1. So we're going to place a 0 here. In our tenths column, we see a 3. And in our hundredths column, we see a 6. For 5/10, again, it's not greater than 1, so 0 in the ones column. We have a 5 in the tenths. We don't have anything in the hundredths, so we can keep it blank, or we can fill it in with a 0. Next, we're going to show each decimal in the decimal grid. So I'm going to take a look at 36/100. So 0 in the ones place. We know we're not going to shade in one hole. Next, we'll go to our tenths. And we know tenths is equivalent to a rod. So I'm first going to show 3 rods. So 1, 2, and 3. I did that, check. And now I have hundredths, and I know my hundredths are represented by units, so I'm going to need to include 6 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Check. Next, I'm going to show 5/10. So again, we're not filling in the whole grid because it's less than 1, sorry. And then we're going to look at our tenths. We see that there's a 5 there. Again, we know tenths we're using a rod, so we're going to include 5 rods. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we can use these decimal grids to see which decimal is greater. And we can see that 5/10 is greater than 36/100. So in this order, it's going to say 36/100 is less than 5/10. And our last problem, we have 23 hundredths compared to 8 hundredths. We're going to start out with our place value chart. So 23 hundredths is less than 1. In our tenths column, we have a 2. In our hundredths column, we have a 3. For 8 hundredths, we have 0, it's less than 1. In our tenths column, we also have a 0. And then in our hundredths, we have an 8. Now we need to model these decimals in the decimal grid. So for 23 hundredths, I see that I have 2 tenths, which means I need 2 rods. 1, 2. But I also still have 3 hundredths, which means I need to include 3 units. 1, 2, 3. For 8 hundredths, I don't have any tenths, so I'm not going to have any rods, but then I have an 8 in my hundredths column, so I'm going to need 8 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we know that 23 hundredths is greater than 8 hundredths, so we're going to place the greater than sign.